Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever had that feeling, that flicker, that unsettling sense that the world we think we know is maybe just one thin layer, and that beneath it lies something truly inexplicable? Today, we're really diving into those kinds of moments. We've gathered a collection of firsthand accounts. These are raw, deeply personal stories, testimonies of paranormal and unexplained experiences shared by people from, all walks of life. These aren't campfire stories or made-up tales. They're what people say they actually went through.
And what's compelling here, I think, is how these personal narratives give us such a unique window. Our goal today is to sort of explore this rich tapestry of experiences. We want to look for common threads, maybe some surprising differences, and ultimately what these often profoundly unsettling encounters might tell us about the edges of our known reality. These aren't just stories to scare you. They offer genuine insights, into moments that just defy easy explanation.
Right. So let's start with some encounters that are just so immediate, so chilling. They basically shatter your perception of reality right there in the moment. Imagine you're just going about a totally normal day, and then bam, everything just shifts. Take this one account, for instance, from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Someone's just browsing in a thrift shop, totally mundane.
Completely normal.
Yeah. But as they're leaving, this sudden, really debilitating disorientation just washes over them. Chills, nausea, this profound confusion. They kind of stumble out into the parking lot, and this truck pulls up. The sky seems to get darker, their vision blurs, and this silent man, maybe late 40s, gets out. And then this intense, non-human voice screams inside their head, just screams, "Run!" They bolt for their car, drive off shaking like a leaf. Later, they were utterly convinced they'd just seen, quote, a glimpse of the devil.
Wow. That's intense.
It really is. A truly visceral experience. Then there's this other one, the account of the Tranquility hitchhikers from California back in 1999. The narrator is walking home, like 8 miles after a party, hoping for a ride. It's cold, windy, lightning flashes, a car pulls over, driver gets out. But something is just deeply wrong. Their movements are stiff, really unnatural. Another flash of lightning hits them, and it reveals what looks like a mannequin. Blank, unsettling smile.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah. Then the passenger, just a female silhouette before, also seems to be a dummy. The narrator just screams and runs straight into a muddy cornfield, hearing wrestling right behind them. When they finally dare to look back, they see this woman in a blue jumpsuit and a baseball cap, but with the face of a pig. They just ran, hearing their friends screaming too, convinced they'd all witnessed the same impossible thing.
The psychological impact there must be immense. These aren't just quick scares. They often trigger this deep, it's almost an ontological shock. It forces people to fundamentally rethink what reality even is. The immediate physical stuff, the nausea, the terror, the disorientation, it just highlights how completely these encounters can shatter your sense of normal. It goes way beyond just folklore, doesn't it? Into something much more deeply unsettling, physically felt.
Absolutely. So from that kind of immediate reality-shattering impact, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about a different kind of encounter. These lingering presences, the sort of familiar hauntings that gradually weave themselves into daily life. Imagine sharing your home, your most private space, with something else. There's this story from Fraser Valley, British Columbia. A couple is woken up one night by what sounds like two women arguing loudly.
Yeah.
Then it changes to a child crying for grandma. The narrator, surprisingly, wasn't afraid. They actually spoke to the child's spirit, told her to keep asking for her grandma's help, and the sound stopped. Later, they found burn marks from an old fire hidden above the kitchen ceiling, hinting at maybe some tragic history in the house.
Right, and while some might try to explain these persistent things away, maybe psychological factors, maybe residual trauma, what's really compelling about this case is how it seems to echo across time. Because years later, in '97, after moving to Surrey, British Columbia, the same narrator heard that exact distinctive crying sound again in their new house. It traveled through the rooms, even terrified their cat.
No way.
Yeah, and get this. Her grandparents had a strikingly similar experience back in 1932 in their great-grandparents' house. A crying sound moving around the kitchen table, then out to a barn. So this raises an important question, doesn't it? When you have such a specific phenomena repeating across generations, across different locations within the same family, how do you tell the difference between individual imagination and something well shared and sustained?
That's a really powerful point, how these threads can connect over decades. And yet, for some people, the gut reaction is still to find a rational explanation. It makes you wonder, how strong does the evidence need to be before we maybe reconsider what's possible? Think about another account, this one from northern Michigan. A friend named Missy kept hearing babies crying outside her bedroom at night regularly. The narrator telling the story was skeptical at first, naturally, but then she stayed over one night and heard it herself. The sound changed, like from one baby crying to maybe 3, then back down. Went on for a solid 5 minutes. Both girls heard it at the exact same time. A shared sensory experience that, well, it made the narrator a firm believer right then and there.
That shared element is key in many accounts.
Definitely. Then there's the story of the Michigan Watcher. Someone describes growing up in a house where they constantly felt like they weren't alone. Just this unsettling presence. Their cat would just stare, fixated at empty spots for hours on end. Childlike laughing woke the narrator up one night, which actually prompted their parents to do this ritual. They use a lit candle and an open Bible, trying to help the spirit move on. And while that particular entity seemed to leave, they felt another presence remained a watcher spirit, described as a 6'3" shadowy figure, only ever seen in the periphery, never directly interacting, just there.
Always watching.
Exactly. Years later, visiting the childhood home after it was empty, the narrator felt this overwhelming wave of just immense sadness and loneliness, believing it was the watcher's emotions still lingering. And maybe for a slightly lighter touch, though still weird, there's Charlie. In the early 90s, a young narrator lived in a house with a spirit they sort of affectionately named Charlie. It started small, like the laundry room door closing by itself. Simple stuff. But one night, they're all watching TV, and suddenly their sister's bedroom radio and their parents' alarm clock both turn on full blast at the exact same second. Everyone freaked out, obviously thought someone broke in, but the young narrator just giggled and said, "It's okay, it's just Charlie, Mom."
Huh. Just Charlie.
Right. But the kicker is, to turn on that old radio, you had to turn 2 separate knobs, one for power, one for volume. It wasn't just a button push.
Okay. That makes it much harder to dismiss as a simple power surge or something.
Exactly. Rules out a simple glitch.
It really does. And what's compelling about these kinds of persistent presences is how they just become part of someone's life, woven into the daily fabric. Witnesses aren't just having these isolated scares, they're living with these phenomena.
Yeah.
Sometimes they try to understand them, sometimes they just accept them. What seems to emerge from these accounts is this consistent theme. The human mind's remarkable and sometimes, unsettling ability to integrate experiences that just defy logic, adapting its own definition of normal to include the inexplicable.
Okay, so moving on from things that stay to things that vanish. Moments where reality itself seems to bend or break, where things disappear without a trace or just defy known physics. This is where logic really takes a backseat. Take the Kilgore Walker story from South Dakota, early 1970s. A cousin and his son are on a beer run, driving to Kilgore, Nebraska. They see a man and woman walking along the road, offer them a ride. But to their absolute astonishment, the pair just vanish. Poof, gone.
Just like that.
Just like that. Goosebumps crawling up the cousin's arms, but he keeps driving. 2 miles later, the same 2 walkers reappear on the roadside. He stops again, and they vanish again. Terrified, he floored it, got the beer, and drove straight home. And apparently, even today, locals warn people not to walk that particular stretch of road after dark because of these walkers.
Right. That's persistent local folklore tied to a specific terrifying event.
Exactly. Then there's the Highway 36 collision in Missouri, August 2013. And a couple is driving, and up ahead they see this massive explosion. Thick black smoke, huge flames, clearly look like a head-on collision. They pull over immediately, getting ready to help, the narrator bracing themselves mentally to maybe pull bodies from a burning car.
Oh, wow, that's
but
good.
Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, everything disappeared, like hitting rewind. The smoke, the dust, the headlights, the flames, it all just seemed to get sucked up into the air, nothing left on the highway at all. Later, they found out it perfectly matched the details of a real fatal crash that happened on that same spot back in 2007.
A time slip. A residual haunting, I mean.
Yeah.
When multiple witnesses see the same impossible physics or this kind of collective vanishing act, it really forces them to question their grasp on cause and effect.
Right.
And the very solidity of the world, These accounts push right up against the limits of what we think is scientifically possible. They challenge basic ideas about space, time, matter. You'd question your own senses, wouldn't you? Or wonder if reality itself is just far more flexible, far less predictable than we assume.
Absolutely. And here's another vanishing act, this time on I-57 in Illinois. One morning, the narrator's parents' car just died, middle of the highway. They were terrified of getting rear-ended, naturally. Then, instantly, a black pickup truck appeared right behind them. like instantly, in a perfect T-shaped formation, blocking traffic. The driver just sat there, unmoving, staring straight ahead.
Strange.
Very. After about 45 seconds, their car just miraculously started again. They looked back to wave thanks or something, and the truck was just gone. Not pulled away, not turned off, just vanished. The parents remained convinced it was some kind of protective entity.
Guardian angel in a pickup?
Maybe. And if vanishing trucks aren't enough to bend your mind, how about Gravity Hill in Los Angeles? Now, for anyone unfamiliar, these are notorious spots where, usually due to an optical illusion, it looks like your car rolls uphill when you put it in neutral.
Right, the illusion spots.
Yeah. But in 2007, 3 friends went to the LA one late, like 2:30 a.m., already felt uneasy. They stopped the car, put it in neutral, and it starts moving uphill on its own. Okay, maybe the illusion, maybe not. But then, as they try to leave, their brand new car couldn't get above 20 miles per hour for about a mile. Just sluggish, like something was holding it back. And one of the friends saw a figure standing next to a tree as they were finally pulling away. Add in 0 phone reception. The terror was apparently palpable. A really bizarre mix of weird physics and unsettling visuals.
These accounts, they just force you to radically reevaluate basic physics, don't they? Asking if our fundamental assumptions about reality, its solidity, its linear nature, are maybe far more flexible than we've ever dared to imagine.
Yeah.
And the fact that some of these are shared experiences makes them very hard to just dismiss as, individual hallucinations.
Exactly. Okay, now let's venture into encounters with creatures. Things that defy easy classification, often tangled up with local folklore or really deep-seated fears. Get ready for some cryptid legends that seem unwilling to stay just legends. First up, the Navajo Skinwalker. Now, for those who don't know, in Navajo culture, these are essentially malevolent witches, shapeshifters, often associated with dark magic and taking animal forms, usually with bad intentions.
A very serious and feared belief.
Extremely. So, early 1980s, a family is traveling through the Navajo reservation in Arizona. Suddenly, this black and hairy figure, wearing what looked like men's clothes, leaps out of a ditch right beside their truck. It caused absolute terror in the whole family, including the father, who was a Vietnam vet, not easily spooked. Days later, back at their home, miles away, they're woken up by drumming sounds outside. They look out and see 3 or 4 men trying to climb their fence, chanting. A Navajo friend later told them it sounded exactly like a skinwalker ritual, maybe trying to steal the family's power or harm them somehow.
That's deeply disturbing. The cultural context there is crucial.
Absolutely. Then there's the Michigan farm creatures account. This is like a multi-generational saga of weirdness on one farm. Stories passed down include a great-grandpa back in the 1930s hearing this growling voice in the woods, perfectly imitating his cousin's voice. Creepy enough. Then his grandfather witnessed a deer that had been, quote, shredded almost beyond recognition by something unknown. It left these terrifying tracks, apparently so disturbing it caused another man who saw them to swear off ever going back onto that land.
Wow.
Yeah. More recently, the narrator's father and a friend saw something they described as wolf-like, but much, much bigger, with this unearthly howl. And the most chilling part, just recently, the narrator and a friend heard their cousin's German shepherds just going ballistic at the dog pen. They heard something literally beating the fence down, followed by a sound the witness described, and I'm quoting directly here, as the scariest fem sound I have ever heard. One of the dogs went missing. Authorities ruled it a coyote attack, but the witnesses are convinced it was something far more sinister.
Goodness. Zooming out a bit, these stories really show how human fears and cultural narratives can shape what we perceive out there in the unknown. They make ancient legends feel terrifyingly immediate and real for the people who experience them. And the consistency, like in those Michigan farm stories, across generations, or between different witnesses, it just makes it harder to simply dismiss them as isolated incidents or misidentifications.
Definitely harder. Okay, finally, let's look at accounts that suggest a deeper, maybe more direct interaction with the spirit world. This could be through psychic ability, maybe shared mental experiences. Some of these really push the boundaries of what science currently understands, getting to the edges of parapsychology. Take the Ouija board story involving Zozo. A self-proclaimed skeptic recounts using a Ouija board. During one session, the planchette spelled out a middle name he had only thought of, not said out loud.
That would get your attention.
For sure. Later sessions introduced a spirit named AJ, supposedly a young boy who drowned, but then things got hostile, and the board kept spelling 000. They only later learned about this entity known as Zozo, a name that pops up in Ouija accounts worldwide, often linked to really negative outcomes, murder, suicide, severe mental distress. It's said to target the mental stability of users.
A definite cautionary tale about opening certain doors.
Absolutely. Then there are these prophetic dreams and visions experienced by a truck driver. He recalls having a distinct flash, a premonition of being run over right before it actually happened. He suffered a severe leg injury. While recovering in the hospital, he had the same recurring dream every single day. A scene set in the 1940s where he felt like he was gaining this profound knowledge about infinite realities. Like everything that has happened and will happen has already happened countless times.
Whoa. Heavy stuff for a hospital dream.
Right. Then later, even off morphine, he opened his eyes one day to see the shining, snowy-looking man standing in his hospital room giving what looked like a Hail Hitler salute. The figure stayed for 15 minutes. He's left questioning, were these just hallucinations from trauma and medication or actual visions of another reality? He also mentions a friend who, during a high fever, had a vivid vision of a woman holding a knife threatening her. It turned out later this was a real person who intensely hated her.
These kinds of accounts, they really do challenge our understanding of consciousness itself, don't they? Precognition, non-physical communication. They seem to suggest a fabric of reality that's far more intricate, more interconnected than we typically assume, hinting at possibilities that science is maybe only just beginning to tentatively explore.
Exactly. I mean, consider the story of the psychic girlfriend. A guy starts dating someone new, and she casually reveals she sees ghosts, like, daily. She then proceeds to accurately identify 3 distinct entities in his house. One she said was deceased, another was more like an emotional presence in the garage, and a third one that was apparently always with him.
Okay.
But what really floored him was her incredibly precise description of a deceased friend of his, someone she had absolutely no way of knowing about. She described his specific biker clothes, a green guitar he owned, his long hair, mustache, even specific neck and arm tattoos, and she knew somehow that he had shot himself.
That level of detail is hard to explain away.
Impossible, really. She even described seeing figures she called deaths, beings in black robes with scythes who she claimed enter our reality to collect the souls of the freshly deceased. The sheer amount of specific, unknowable information just completely shook him. And for something just truly bizarrely shared, there's the shared haunting dream. 2 completely separate people, Tim and the narrator of this account, had eerily similar terrifying dreams. Both dreamt they were lost in this dark, misty bog, or maybe a road. They felt cold, disoriented, couldn't breathe properly, and saw a flickering light in the distance. And in their respective dreams, a woman spoke directly into their minds. To Tim, she said, "You must do what I say," to the narrator. "It's time for you to change."
Exact same core elements.
Very similar core elements in that direct mental communication, and the physical after effects. Tim woke up with an actual rope burn mark on his neck. The narrator woke up with their arms mysteriously damp. They both said the experience deeply affected their lives afterwards. And finally, these almost classic ghostly encounters, like the Phantom RAF pilots. A Harvard grad is in Times Square during World War II. He meets 2 British RAF pilots, seemingly on leave. They spend hours dining and talking, but the pilots keep checking their watches nervously. As midnight approaches, they thank him for the evening. Then they revealed they had to wait until after they were dead to fulfill their dream of visiting Times Square, explaining they'd been killed in action when their planes were shot down the night before over Berlin. And right on the stroke of midnight, they just vanished.
Wow. These accounts, especially the ones touching on precognition or shared mental stuff, or even these post-mortem encounters, they pose really profound questions. Questions about the nature of consciousness, of time, of reality itself. They strongly suggest a kind of connectivity, maybe a non-physical aspect to our existence that, frankly, science is still struggling to even frame properly. It opens up a realm of possibilities far beyond our current, maybe limited understanding. It's fascinating how these deeply personal experiences often resonate with older, almost archetypal narratives of the unknown.
So after all that, what does this all mean? I mean, we've journeyed through these encounters with truly unsettling figures. We've lingered with these familiar hauntings. We've questioned physics with impossible disappearances. We've ventured into cryptid territory, explored psychic impressions, direct communication. The sheer variety and the chilling specificity of these personal accounts is just, it's astounding, really.
It is. And while definitive scientific explanations for a lot of this remain elusive, the consistency you see across different people, different places, even different times, it really invites us to consider perspectives beyond the mundane, the everyday. It encourages us maybe to look at the world with a bit more curiosity and perhaps, a bit more humility about what we think we actually understand.
Right, because if these individuals truly experienced what they describe, and they certainly believe they did, What does that imply about the world around us? What unseen forces or maybe other realities might be waiting just beyond our perception, in the quiet moments maybe, or even hidden in plain sight? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unexplained. We hope these stories gave you something to think about. Maybe reflect on them, perhaps even consider any strange encounters you might have had yourself.